You ever wonder how America really got made? Not with parchment and powdered wigs, but with hot lead, smoke, and a whole lot of noise. Look, history books will talk about debates, diplomacy, and declarations. But the truth is, a good chunk of America was built behind a trigger. From the backwoods of the Revolution to the jungles of Vietnam, the story of this country's been written with black powder, brass casings, and blood. Today, we're looking at 7 guns that didn't just show up. They showed out. These weren't just tools of war. They were instruments of change. Some were overbuilt cannons strapped to your belt. Others were mass-produced death dealers that turned boys into soldiers. But every single one of them helped forge the United States into what it is today, whether you like that or not. So grab your ear pro and settle in, because we're diving into firearms that didn't just fire shots. They fired the first chapters of American history. Long before the United States had an army, a president, or a proper name, the Kentucky rifle was already rewriting the rules of war. Known more formally as the American long rifle, it was the first firearm made entirely in the colonies, and it didn't act like the rest. While European armies lined up with smoothbore muskets that fired more smoke than results, this rifle delivered precision where others delivered panic. Built with a rifled barrel, it spun a 40 to 50 caliber ball with enough stability to land shots at 200 yards or more. That wasn't just a technical advantage, it was a battlefield revolution. Instead of firing into the void, American marksmen were picking targets and making every shot count. Its long, octagonal barrel, often 35 inches or more, combined with tight powder tolerances gave it exceptional velocity and ballistic consistency for the era. The flintlock ignition system, while primitive by modern standards, was finely tuned by skilled gunsmiths. Early versions featured set triggers that allowed for surprisingly light and crisp breaks, improving accuracy for patient shooters. It was light enough to carry through dense forests and accurate enough to ruin a redcoat's day before he knew anyone was watching. It didn't rely on formations, bayonets, or orders from above. It relied on the man behind the trigger. This wasn't a weapon for ceremony or uniformed ranks. It was for frontiersmen, scouts, and patriots who fought on their terms. The Kentucky rifle didn't just kill at range, it redefined what range meant. It didn't win wars alone, but it made the people holding it a whole lot harder to conquer. The Brown Bess wasn't elegant, it wasn't precise, and it sure as hell wasn't American. But for better or worse, this British-built musket still helped shape the country that eventually broke free from the empire that issued it. Used by redcoats, loyalists, and even early Continental soldiers desperate for anything that fired. The Brown Bess was everywhere during the American Revolution. It fired a 75 caliber ball from a smoothbore barrel with a flintlock ignition system. The smoothbore design allowed for faster loading but sacrificed accuracy. Standard barrel length was around 39 to 42 inches, optimized for bayonet use in formation. Despite the lack of rifling, the large caliber created devastating wound channels at close range. The lock mechanism was robust and could spark reliably even in damp conditions, critical for wartime field use. No rifling, no finesse, just pure volume and intimidation. Accuracy was laughable past 75 yards, but it didn't need to be a marksman's tool. In formation, with ranks of soldiers firing in waves, the Brown Bess delivered a wall of smoke and lead. Reloading took about 20 seconds if you were calm, which you never were. What made this musket so historically important wasn't its brilliance, but its availability. It was the baseline, the standard, the weapon of empires. And when patriots turned those muskets around and used them against their former rulers, it became something else entirely. In the end, the Brown Bess didn't symbolize freedom or revolution. It symbolized firepower in a time when sides were still being chosen. Sometimes history isn't made with the best weapon. It's made with the one you can get. The Colt Walker wasn't just a sidearm, it was American overkill cast in steel. In the 1840s, Texas Ranger. Samuel Walker didn't ask Samuel Colt for balance or subtlety. He asked for something that would terrify enemies at full gallop. What Colt delivered was a 6-shot, 44 caliber revolver so massive it looked more like a sawed-off rifle than a pistol. It weighed over 4 pounds and delivered recoil strong enough to remind you who was really in charge. With a 9-inch barrel and black powder charges capable of dropping a horse, the Walker was unmatched in power. Each cylinder chamber held up to 60 grains of black powder, nearly double the load of later Colt revolvers. It had no top strap, which contributed to both its lighter weight and structural vulnerabilities. The loading lever underneath the barrel often dropped under recoil, occasionally locking the gun mid-fight unless modified or manually secured between shots. Cavalrymen gained the ability to fire 6 rounds in succession, a massive edge in mounted combat where speed and shock mattered. For its time, it was revolutionary. But all that power had a price. The Walker had a reputation for catastrophic failures. Its cylinders sometimes exploded under pressure, Its weight made the belt carry impractical, so most troopers stored it in saddle holsters. Despite its flaws, the Walker changed everything. It proved that revolvers weren't just personal weapons. They could be military sidearms. It wasn't refined. It wasn't safe. But it delivered unmatched firepower when it counted. If you want elegance, look elsewhere. If you wanted fear, the Walker did the job with thunder. Colt Single Action Army Peacemaker. They called it the Peacemaker, which is hilarious if you know how many people it killed before anyone ever shook hands. The Colt Single Action Army wasn't just another revolver, it was the revolver. Released in 1873 and chambered in .45 Colt, it became the standard sidearm of the WWII Army and the unofficial signature of every gunfight, land dispute, and whiskey-fueled disagreement west of the Mississippi. 6 rounds, single action, rock solid. It featured a fixed sight system milled into the top strap, offering decent alignment but requiring skill to use effectively. Cylinder rotation was clockwise, and loading required half-cocking the hammer to open the gate. Its robust, solid frame and simple lockwork made it exceptionally durable, even in harsh frontier conditions with minimal cleaning or maintenance. It wasn't fancy, but it worked. Every single time. The loading gate was slow. The hammer had to be cocked each shot, but no one cared. When this gun came out, things got quiet. It was reliable, simple, and didn't play favorites. It killed lawmen, bandits, soldiers, and civilians alike. All it needed was a finger and a reason. It wasn't just effective, it was cinematic. This is the gun Hollywood couldn't stop filming. The one on every movie poster, every hip holster, every standoff at high noon. But long before the camera showed up, real men settled real scores with it. Modern revolvers might be smoother, lighter, even prettier, but none of them ever walked into Tombstone. It didn't bring peace. It ended conversations, permanently, with smoke, lead, and one last word: Springfield Model, 1861 rifled musket. If the Kentucky rifle whispered from the trees, the Springfield Model, 1861 screamed from the smoke. This was the rifle that turned the American Civil War into a slaughterhouse of industrialized precision. It didn't just kill, it did it efficiently, repeatedly, and at terrifying distances. And it was carried by hundreds of thousands of soldiers who barely knew how to hold it before they were told to march toward cannon fire, firing a .58 caliber Minié ball through a rifled barrel. This percussion cap musket had an effective range of up to 500 yards. That may not sound impressive now, but for its time, it was devastating. Suddenly, soldiers who'd been trained to fight shoulder to shoulder in Napoleonic lines were being torn apart from distances they couldn't even respond to. And unlike the Kentucky rifle, this wasn't handcrafted. It was mass-produced by Northern industry on a scale that made warfare feel like factory work. It didn't matter if you were brave, fast, or lucky. If you were in range, the Springfield didn't care. It was a democratizer of death, available in bulk, issued en masse, and fed into battles like Antietam, Shiloh, and Gettysburg, where the bodies piled up faster than the supplies. It wasn't elegant. It wasn't heroic. It was mechanical, bloody, and reliable. And that made it perfect for a war that chewed men up by the thousands. The Springfield didn't win the war alone, but it damn sure made sure it wasn't short. If the Colt Peacemaker was the gun on every cowboy's hip, the Winchester 1873 was the one in his saddlebag and in his hands when things got serious. Known as the gun that won the West, it didn't do it with brute force or mythical status. It did it with firepower, reliability, and being just damn everywhere. The Model 1873 was a lever-action rifle chambered in .44-40, the same round used in many revolvers of the time. That meant one cartridge for both sidearm and rifle, a frontier man's dream. It had a 15-round tubular magazine and cycled so fast that, in the right hands, it sounded almost automatic. The action was smooth, the recoil manageable, and the result was a rifle that stayed in the fight as long as you did. This wasn't a rifle for parades or generals. This was a working man's weapon. Ranchers, sheriffs, outlaws, buffalo hunters. They all carried it not for status, but survival. You didn't own a Winchester to show off. You owned one because wolves, rustlers, or angry neighbors didn't give second chances. The 1873 didn't just win the West, it stayed there, in barns, on horses, behind saloon bars. It was the kind of rifle you passed down, not hang on a wall. Some guns became legends because of wars. The Winchester became a legend because it was busy helping people live long enough to fight another day. Ask any World War II veteran what gave them the edge, and odds are they won't say bravery or luck. They'll say the M1 Garand, issued to U.S. troops starting in 1936. It was the first standard-issue semi-automatic rifle in military history. While enemies were still cycling bolt actions, American soldiers were already 2 rounds ahead and moving forward, chambered in 30-06. The Garand fed from an 8-round aim-block clip and delivered consistent, accurate fire at up to 500 yards. More importantly, it did it faster than anything else on the battlefield. In the hands of a trained infantryman, it could dump a full clip in seconds and be ready for more before the other guy finished chambering his second shot. It wasn't light, it wasn't pretty, but it worked in mud, sand, snow, and blood. From Normandy beaches to Okinawa ridgelines, it never stopped doing its job. And when that last round popped out with a distinctive metallic ping, it meant you'd survived at least 8 more seconds in hell. General Patton called it the greatest battle implement ever devised, and for once, the general wasn't exaggerating. The Garand gave every American soldier a built-in fire superiority advantage, and in a world war, that was the difference between ground gained and names carved in stone. Some rifles earn respect. The M1 Garand demanded it, one ping at a time. No rifle in American history showed up with more expectations and more controversy than the M16. When it first hit the jungles of Vietnam in the 1960s, it was supposed to be the future. Lightweight, accurate, and space-age sleek. It looked like the U.S. had finally built the perfect infantry rifle. Then it jammed. A lot. Chambered in 5.56 NATO and fed by 20-round magazines early on, the M16 used a direct impingement gas system and plastic furniture that made it feel more like a toy than a tool of war. Soldiers were told it was self-cleaning. That lie got a lot of men killed. Without proper maintenance or the right ammo, the rifle would seize up in the worst possible moments. The enemy had AKs that ran through mud and hell. Americans had a rifle that choked on humidity and false promises. But the story didn't end there. Over decades of redesigns, from the A1 to the A4, the M16 evolved into one of the most modular and accurate rifles on the planet. Its ergonomics, low recoil, and adaptability made it a favorite among professionals who knew how to run it right. The M16 didn't start as a legend. It had to earn its scars. And it did. One malfunction, one upgrade, and one firefight at a time. It came in as a promise. It stayed because it finally learned how to survive a war, and how to help others survive it too. At the end of the day, these guns weren't just mechanical relics. They were part of the DNA of America's rise, written in powder burns and battlefield echoes. Each one tells a story of grit, rebellion, and the ugly, necessary business of winning. Now it's your turn. Which one of these guns would you take into history, or which one would you add to the list? Let me know in the comments. I read every single one, especially the ones that get salty. Hit that like button, subscribe if you haven't already, and do me one favor if you're going to talk about history. At least bring something with iron sights. I'll catch you next time. And for the love of John Moses Browning, leave the safe queen at home.